Hello there, welcome to Genesis Models and part 2 of our advanced inbox review of the Tanmodel T-33 shooting star. So before I get into where we left off from part 1, I want to talk a little bit about the plastic here. I was looking really closely at all of the molds and noticed that there's plats forged into every single one of these sprues. So I don't know if Tanmodel actually purchased the mold from plats or if they had some sort of agreement to be able to rebox this kit or something, but I think that's something that you may want to know if you're considering this kit. So just a little oversight on my part and throwing in that detail at the beginning of the kit review. So, okay. So where we left off on part 1 is we had that join issue with the right wing and the wing fillet on the fuselage, where we had that step up along that whole join line. And I showed you where that gap was, and we closed that gap with a clip. We put some glue in there, and as you can tell right here, I do have that wing now mounted onto the forward fuselage part, and as you can tell, we just don't have that step up anymore on that right wing along the whole join line. So just kind of closing that gap up there really fixed the issue, and we never really had an issue on the left wing as well, and that stayed true as I glued the entire wing assembly onto the forward fuselage part. So all in all, I would say this whole forward section is a really good fit so far for this particular kit. The only other issue that I want to kind of bring up right now is talking a little bit about the Empanadas Assembly, okay? Now, as you can tell right here on this particular piece, it is a one-piece vertical stabilizer on both sides, and you can actually see right along here that that's where the join line is going to be for this second empennage piece. Now, as we look at this particular side here, and I try to get some lighting focused on that, you can actually see that that join line on the finished side actually represents various panel lines that go across this whole structure here. You can get a good view right there. So we come around on this side, and that whole join line are all panel lines on the other side of this particular piece. So you can see that right here as we get this part positioned by the locating tabs, and you can see that join line right there. And obviously the first thing to note is that there is a pretty significant gap right there along that whole join line, and certainly more prominent than the panel lines that you see on the finished side of the vertical stabilizer here. So one thing that you can do to fix that is you can do the Vallejo putty technique that Bobby does in a lot of his videos. You can really goop the Vallejo putty down in there, and you can be aggressive at wiping it away, let it shrink back a little bit, and you should close those very fine gaps that are there. You should be able to really get a nice fine recessed panel line right there as well. There's not much you could do with these particular parts here to be able to manually close that gap yourself and push up, because if you do try to force that close a little bit, you're really going to impact your seam down here on the bottom, and that's another issue you're going to have to contend with. So just maybe something to note as you're doing the empennage assembly when you're assembling these two parts. Now, one of the other things that I want to point out to you too is, since I have this engine mounted in here, let's say we take this particular piece and we get it positioned in there so that we can kind of see what it's going to look like with this exhaust ducting right here for the engine. There are some locating pins right there and on this particular piece as well. So when we get this installed right on its locating pins right there, and you have the empennage attached to the forward fuselage here, you're actually seeing that there really is no contact between that exhaust duct right there and the engine itself. So you have that gap there. So when you put these parts together, you won't have to worry so much about having those things aligned. Otherwise, if you do build this particular kit with that empennage assembly on that dolly cart, you are attaching this particular exhaust piece to the engine itself. So, okay. So that's the only other thing I wanted to point out for the empennage assembly, so I'm going to keep moving on with this build. Okay, so we're on the final stages of this particular build. We only have a few more things to put together, and as you can see, I've got more things mounted on this fuselage. So we're going to start this with the tip tanks, right? I've got one of them already mounted on the right wing. I'm going to mount this particular one on the left wing here, and I wanted to point out that these are dedicated to either its right wing or its left wing, and you can tell that by this join area, this mating part right here, where you have the upper camber of the airfoil being or having more curvature to it than the lower portion of the airfoil. So that's how you can tell that these are specific for either the right wing or the left wing. So we're going to get this mounted. Quick dry fit right here to show you the join right there, and as you can tell, let's make sure we get these leading edges and trailing edges lined up. You could tell that that join is a very, very nice join on the top. I didn't do any sanding or anything like that, so it's a very nice seam that kind of goes all the way from the trailing edge to the forward edge of that wing. Top side looks pretty good. We get that, whoops, we get that dry fit look here on the bottom, and as you can tell, it's a very nice join right there as well once you get that part aligned very nicely. So we're going to go ahead and glue that on there. Going to soften up the mating areas with some extra thin. We'll get that softened up. We'll get the tip tank softened up right there as well. And let's go ahead and get this positioned on there. You can even apply a little more of pressure when you have that glue on there. Again, trailing edge and leading edge lined up. A little pressure makes that join always even a little bit more subtle. So very nice fit. And let's just take a look on the underside and make sure that looks good. That looks pretty good. We're going to just kind of get a little more glue down into that area. Again, just applying a little more pressure so that we can close whatever sort of gaps that there are. And then of course, let's take a look at it from an alignment perspective. Comparing the left tip tank and the right tip tank. Making sure one is not sagging more the other or raised whatsoever. There we go. That looks pretty good there. Okay. Let's go ahead and mount this fin on that tip tank. Now there is a little recessed slot. Not sure if I can get that on camera. There's a little recessed slot that this fits in, so that actually makes for a really nice fit with this particular fin right there. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to get that glued on. I'm going to soften that up a little bit right there in that recessed slot. Probably only have to do that on the tip tank itself. And then let's go ahead and fit that in there nicely. A little bit of pressure. And let's double check that alignment. I think I want to raise that up a little bit. There we go. Alright, so as you can tell, that looks really, really good with that join with that fin as well. So, all superb on these tip tanks, I can tell you that. That's pretty exceptional there. Sometimes you get those T-33 kits from some other manufacturers where you have to do a little bit of filling in those join areas. Okay. Let's shift over to this tail piece here. Quick dry fit just to check out that join. And this dry fit shows that that area, that join all the way around the fuselage is pretty exceptional. you know, it does look like a nice recessed panel line like it should, albeit it's a little more prominent than recessed lines. It's a little more deep than recessed lines that are, you know, around the area. But I think, and we're going to go ahead and glue this on there, I think we can make that a little less prominent with some pressure so that we can kind of close that up a little bit. But as you could tell all the way around, that was a very, very nice join for this particular tail assembly. Oops, a little too much glue. Get that positioned on there. Again, a little bit of pressure. We'll try to close that gap up to make that join line look a little more symmetrical to the panel lines, or a little less pronounced in its depth, to make it a little more like the panel lines that are all the way around. No step ups. Very nice join all the way around again. Very, very pleased with how this tail section mates with the forward fuselage. And there we go. Just kind of get a little close. Again, a little area right there where it's a little bit more prominent than the panel line that you can see going horizontally there. But otherwise, very, very nice fit. All right. Okay, let's get this down. You'll see this is a tail sitter of an aircraft too. Okay. So again, the instructions do call out for 3 grams of nose weight right there. So make sure that you get that in there before you mate those fuselage halves together. Last piece here, we're talking about the canopy. So I do have the framework mounted inside this canopy piece, and as you, not sure if you can really tell here, but there were a couple slots in the clear plastic. Oh, let me get the right zoom here. There were a couple slots in the clear plastic that, you know, shows where that particular framework piece goes, and that takes the guesswork out of alignment. And as you can tell when we get this on there, that particular piece of framework sits very nicely behind the forward seat of the of that cockpit there. Taking a look at where this joins on the aft part of the fuselage. As you can see, we have really nice seam lines all the way in this aft portion of the canopy, all the way across. No gaps whatsoever. Even as you kind of go along the rest of the mating area of the fuselage, I am not seeing any gaps whatsoever with how this canopy fits onto the airframe. Even on the forward side right there, you can't really see any gaps. What this allows you to do is this allows you to leave this canopy off while you paint and weather the aircraft. You can actually trust the fit of this canopy as the very last part that goes onto the aircraft, not having any gaps anywhere along these lines to have to fill or anything like that and then touch up paint wise. So yes, you can definitely leave this off all the way across, all the way throughout your build, and it should be a very, very good fit. So that concludes our build phase of this particular kit. Now I think one thing we want to do is really want to take a close look at this entire airframe to really talk about the detail and maybe some of the issues that we encountered during this particular build. So kind of zooming you in here a little bit, let's start with the cockpit assembly that we kicked off the build with. Let me move the lighting a little bit here so that we can focus in a little bit on that detail. Those 2 instrument panels, the forward and aft instrument panels, very nice instrumentation on there. But I thought, you know, one thing that could probably use a little bit more enhancement are those side instrument panels. But then again, I think when you get this particular canopy on and the painted frame of it, you know, you might not see some of that. But still, I think maybe a little opportunity to get those side instrument panels a little more decked out, perhaps with some photo etch and whatnot. Those seats too, you know, you can see that they're very plain seats. They probably could have done a better job with, you know, enhancing those seats with a little more detail, and certainly an opportunity to scratch build, you know, maybe perhaps the cushion that goes down in there, or the seat belts that are on there. Now, taking one quick look at an issue that you're going to have to face is, you know, right down in here you can see a little bit of gap on that join line between these fuselage halves, so that's going to take a little bit of filler and a little bit of sanding, but again, not too much attention. Looking at the rest of that join line across this whole fuselage, you know, you can see that it was a pretty solid fit all the way across, even without removing those sprue burrs that I left on throughout this entire build. So even that forward fuselage part, you can see that seam line for those two fuselage halves being very, very nice. Not a lot of attention is going to have to go into that. A little bit of sanding, maybe a little bit of rescribing of the panel lines that go across that seam, but otherwise, you know, that's always one of the most worrisome parts of a build, and this looks absolutely spectacular. Some more seam lines, especially along these engine intakes, turned out absolutely fabulous. And looking at this particular join line for this belly piece, whoop, let me get you on the camera here. Looking at this particular join line with the belly piece here, it just makes it look like another panel line that's consistent with all the other panel lines that are surrounding this particular portion of the structure. So very nice there, I think, from a mating perspective with that belly piece to the airframe. Now let's take a quick look at this forward landing gear section right here. You can kind of see what gets exposed down in that landing gear bay. So maybe perhaps, you know, if that bothers you, a little bit of you know, enhancing of the detail down in there. But otherwise, when you're looking at the landing gear strut itself, it looks really, really nice, from that oleo strut that's right here to the torque links, the upper and lower torque links right there that actually have a really nice shape to them. The wheel itself, a one-piece wheel, nice hub, wheel hub detail right there. You know, even looking at the aft side of this particular landing gear, we've got some steering cylinder detail right there, the arm, as well as this added uplock piece right here that locks that landing gear in place when it gets retracted. So a really cool addition to the overall detail of this particular wheel well bay. Since we're talking about wheel wells, let's focus here on the main wheels and look at that. I mean, nice multi-piece landing gear door system for each of the wheels, just kind of adds to the overall depth of these particular wheel assemblies here. 3 doors per landing gear, and of course the landing gear too, when we take a look at that, the strut as well, you know, some good shape to the strut. Same thing with the torque links right there, the scissor marks, or the scissor shape right there, you know, nice shape to those. We've got the actuator right there as well. Inside the wheel bay itself, you can see that there is some structural detail with the wheel well bay. You know, maybe take a look at some reference photos, because it is a highly visible area. You know, some of those wheel well bays do not have a lot of visibility into them, but this portion does. So, you know, maybe some reference photos to see, are there some hydraulic runs that run through there, some electrical lines that are routing through these wheel bays, maybe something to deck out a little bit more. Otherwise, certainly do some nice weathering in there. These speed brakes too, I love these speed brakes, right? I mean, we've got the structural aspects to them right here, and then right in the middle we've got the actuator strut right there. So, and of course these speed brakes, they look very nice in the extended position, and really add some additional depth to the underside of this particular aircraft, especially with all of the landing gear exposed. So very, very cool. Looking at the underside of the wings, right, starting off with the tip tank again, very nice joins of the tip tank to the wing right there. We've got nice recessed panel line detail and access panels for these particular tip tanks as well. The only thing is that, of course, we have more prominent seam lines on this two-part tip tank, two-piece tip tank that you have to assemble. So you're certainly going to have to address seam lines both on the top side and the bottom side with a little more attention than the fuselage seams. You're definitely going to have to do some rescribing of the panel lines across those seams as well. So Overall, from the wing perspective, nice panel lines going all the way through, nice detail on some additional access panels, some hinge marks, trim tabs. Of course, we had that one issue with the fit at that wing join right there to the fuselage by the fillet, but that's been resolved with closing that gap. So we talked about that a couple times. So overall, I'm very pleased with the mating area, the join area of the wing to the fuselage here. Coming all the way through, nice consistent detail going across on the top side. Let's take a look at the underside there as well. Same story, even the added depth of a particular trim tab actuator protrusion right there. Very cool. And as we get to the center fuselage, you can see this particular access panel here, which is symmetric to the other side as well, that has some nice recessed rivet detail as well. Same here with these particular panels as well. Nice little recessed rivet detail right there. A lot of nice protrusions. I'm not sure if these are antennas or sensors or anything like that, but on the underside we have a lot of nice protrusions right there. You know, an antenna right here that was actually a part you had to glue on. We have, of course, the pitot tube right there. That was actually part of the mold, and then this particular antenna that's just forward of the nose landing gear, that was also part of the mold as well for the fuselage halve. Again, these are, of course, some burrs that I left from the sprue, so nothing to be too worried about with those. The join line for that tail section, very similar to the fuselage halves, very nice. Minimal sanding that you'll have to do, minimal rescribing of those panel lines that go across that seam line. Looking at the detail, you have nice panel lines, vents, so on and so forth with that whole tail section. Here is that join for the dual piece tail. So a little work is going to have to go on there, certainly from a filling standpoint, just to try to get it to make it look like the same panel line that's on the finished side right here. You know, you can see that same shape throughout that panel line right there, curving up right there. So all of that was that same panel line there, and it's going to take a little work to make this side look exactly like that finished side right there. But otherwise, that whole tail section is some very, very nice detail all the way down to the trim tabs, and I think they have little trim tab actuator protrusions on both sides as well. So, and that completes our build phase of the advanced inbox review, and I gotta tell you, that was a nice little kit to put together. It was nice to see how well everything went together, mating areas and all of that stuff, and it certainly would be an exceptional addition to anybody's 72nd scale kit collection. This did provide some additional motivation to look a little more closely at their other couple kits. You know, they have the RF-84 Thunder Flash, which looks like a really cracking kit, nicely detailed. I want to do a comparison of their Buccaneer model to perhaps the Airfix Buccaneer that was released earlier this year, just to kind of see where they sit. And it really will be interesting to see how their current projects pan out from a quality and detail perspective. Now I'm going to have to figure out what am I going to do with this hunk of plastic that's this really nice hunk of plastic that's put together. Maybe I'll have to use it as a paint mule or something like that. So I do hope you enjoyed this advanced inbox review, and until the next time, I'm Bill Boudreau, this is Genesis Models, and I hope you've enjoyed.